Ronan cast trudged through the knee-deep snow, his breath puffing visibly in the air as the icy wind cut through the frayed edges of his jacket. His boots sank with each step, soaked and heavy, and the bitter cold gnawed at his fingers even through insulated gloves. He was running out of time. His ship was totaled. The emergency beacon was barely functional. If he didn't find shelter soon, he'd be just another frozen corpse for scavengers to pick over. The planet, officially labeled MX-17, was a death trap of perpetual winter. No settlements, no known wildlife, just snow and the bones of forgotten rocks. The kind of place smugglers disappeared into, never to be seen again. His mission had already gone to hell. Now it was just about surviving. He scanned the endless white for anything, motion, shelter, even wreckage. What he saw instead made his pulse kick. A streak of dark crimson stained the snow ahead. Blood, fresh. Ronan drew his sidearm, half-charged and barely a threat, and moved cautiously toward it. The trail led toward a jagged rock formation, the wind already trying to cover it over. He followed it. The smear led to the mouth of a half-buried cave, concealed by a crust of snow and ice. Inside, the air was a few degrees warmer. The wind muted. He stepped in, blinking into the dimness. And there she was, slumped against the far wall. Not human. Thick white fur streaked with orange, matted with blood. Slender limbs curled inward in pain. A tail, long and fluffy, wrapped protectively around her torso. Her ears, sharp and pointed, twitched faintly at his approach. For a moment, Ronan thought she was some kind of predator. But then her chest rose with a weak, uneven breath. She was alive, barely. Ronan hesitated, then dropped to one knee beside her. His medic's instinct overrode everything else. He opened his satchel, pulled out a cauterizing gel and a sterile bandage. As he reached for her wound, she growled, low and broken but defensive. "Easy," he said gently. "You're hurt. Let me help, or you're not going to make it." She didn't understand him. But after a long pause, she didn't resist either. He worked fast, cleaned the gash on her side, wrapped her arm. It wasn't perfect, but it would keep her from bleeding out. When it was done, he leaned back on his heels, exhaling. She was unconscious again, breathing slower now, stable. Ronan built a fire with what little he had, flicking a spark from the ruined wiring of a survival pack. The flame caught, barely, but it was enough. He sat by the fire, his eyes drifting back to her, this wild, beautiful, injured creature. "What the hell are you?" he whispered. And that was when her eyes opened. Golden, unblinking. The fire crackled softly, barely enough to keep the frost at bay. But it was all Ronan had been able to manage with salvaged flint and a few dried strips of insulation foam. It stank, but it burned. The cave's narrow opening blocked most of the wind, and the walls reflected some warmth, but his breath still fogged with every exhale. Across from him, the Vulpine woman lay curled against a fur-lined thermal blanket he'd pulled from his emergency gear. Her tail twitched occasionally, her ears flicking at faint noises deeper in the cave or beyond the snow. She hadn't stirred much since he patched her up, but now and then she muttered something in a language he didn't understand, soft, musical, and guttural all at once. Ronan sat close, his knees pulled to his chest, watching her with weary curiosity. He hadn't planned on company, especially not like this. Alien, clearly, but intelligent and unlike anything he'd seen in all his time bouncing between colonies and dead worlds. Then, without warning, her eyes snapped open. Golden, burning even in the dim firelight. Before Ronan could react, she moved, swift and silent, closing the space between them in a blur. 1 second he was blinking at her still form. The next, he was pinned to the ground, her claws pressed lightly to his chest. He froze. Her face hovered inches from his, warm breath brushing across his cheek. She sniffed, ears perking forward, her tail curling behind her like a whip ready to strike. "You touched me," she rasped, voice gravel-low but undeniably feminine. Ronan's hand stayed still, palms open beside him. Yeah, he said slowly, eyes locked with hers. You were dying. She narrowed her eyes. That is not done lightly. Well, he said, breathing steadily despite the weight of her legs straddling his hips, I'm not big on watching people bleed out. She tilted her head slightly, her muzzle twitching. You know not what you've done. Ronan gave a soft snort. Seems to be a theme this week. A long pause stretched between them. Then her claws retracted slightly, not gone, but gentler, if claws against the chest could be called gentle. Her tail coiled possessively around his left leg, and her voice dropped to a near whisper. You are mine now. Ronan blinked. She wasn't limping. He'd wrapped that wound tight, sealed it with every scrap of coagulant gel he had left. By all rights, she should still be lying down, maybe unconscious. But there she was, moving like a predator reborn, like nothing short of death itself could stop her. You heal fast, he said, breaking the silence. Kira turned, those molten eyes catching the firelight again. We have to, she replied simply, folding her arms across her chest. Her thick orange fur was streaked with dried blood, but she didn't seem to notice or care. Ronan chewed on the inside of his cheek, watching her. He'd seen alien species recover quickly, but this was different. There was no hesitation in her posture. No pain, just awareness. Like she was waiting for something to come or something to be said. So he started cautiously. About this whole "I'm yours now" thing. She tilted her head again. It was starting to become a habit, that curious little motion. Yes. I'm not saying I'm running for the hills, he said. But where I come from, a life-saving gesture is more of a "thank you" situation, not a claim. Kira blinked slowly. And yet you stayed. That's not, he cut himself off. Look, I'm not heartless. You were bleeding out. I wasn't going to leave you there. She stepped closer, tail still drifting lazily behind her. But you could have. He didn't have an answer to that, because she was right. She crouched across from him, arms resting on her knees, her eyes never leaving his face. You say humans choose, that you value freedom. She said the word like it was foreign. So choose. Choose what? Kira leaned forward. To leave me, or not. That silence stretched long and heavy between them, filled with only the sound of the wind and the soft crackle of fire. He stared into the flames, his thoughts spinning faster than he could make sense of. He didn't owe her anything. He hadn't asked for this. But the way she looked at him, like he was the only stable thing in a collapsing world, it stirred something inside him. You saved me too, you know, he said quietly. Kira's brow furrowed. How? Ronan looked up, meeting her gaze. I was alone, crashed, freezing, no one coming for me. And then there you were, bleeding all over the snow. Still breathing. You gave me something to fight for. Her ears twitched. I'm not saying I belong to you, he said, holding her gaze. But I'm not going anywhere. For the first time since they met, Kira's expression shifted into something close to softness. Then we are allies, she said. And that single word, allies, felt more important than any vow. Yeah, Ronan murmured, settling back against the wall. Allies. She turned away again, facing the snow-drenched entrance of the cave. Her shoulders no longer braced with tension, but her tail stayed curled lightly around his boot, just enough to remind him he wasn't alone anymore. And he was starting to wonder if he ever wanted to be again. The next morning, the snow was quiet. Too quiet. Ronan stirred to the sound of shifting fur and low, measured breathing beside him. Kira hadn't moved far from him during the night, curling herself in a crescent shape between him and the cave entrance. It was a silent gesture, one he didn't fully understand, but it felt protective, intentional. Outside, The pale light of MX-17's sun filtered through the icy clouds, casting a faint golden glow over the snow. Ronan pushed himself upright, his joints stiff from the cold. Kira stood without a word, brushing the frost from her tail with one clawed hand. "We need to find the wreckage," Ronan said, pulling on his thermal coat. "If anything from my comm survived the crash, we can use it to boost the signal. Might even scavenge a power cell." Kira nodded. "You know where it is?" "Roughly north-northeast, 5 clicks. Ship tore in half on descent. I only had time to grab what I could before the blizzard hit." He paused. "And then I found you." Kira's ears flicked once. "We go." They moved in silence at first, pacing each other through the snow. Ronan noticed how easily she moved over the terrain, her body light on her feet, tail swaying for balance, ears constantly twitching. She was built for this cold, every muscle adapted to it. He, on the other hand, trudged like a lumbering bear through a swamp. "You always live in places like this?" he asked, adjusting the strap on his gear bag. "No," she said simply. "This is exile." He blinked. "Exile?" Kira didn't elaborate, and her gaze never wavered from the snowy horizon. But Ronan knew a door when it was closed. He let it go for now. They traveled for nearly an hour before the first twisted piece of wreckage came into view. One of the engine cowls, blackened and half buried in a snowdrift. A little farther and they spotted the shattered remains of the ship's forward cabin. Ronan quickened his pace. "There," he said, pointing to a section of hull partially buried under ice. "My beacon was in that panel." He dropped to his knees, clawing through the snow and frozen debris. Kira stood nearby, scanning the tree-line of glacial spires in the distance, ears twitching. The beacon was there, bent but intact. Ronan let out a breath of relief as he pulled it free, wiping ice from the interface. But when he tried to power it on, the screen stayed dark. "No, no, no. Don't you do this to me," he muttered, popping the back panel. The internal power core was cracked, its housing shattered in the crash. "Damn it." Kira crouched beside him, silently watching. Then she reached into the leather pouch strapped to her thigh and pulled something out. A small, black, rectangular device with glowing etchings across its surface. She handed it to him. Ronan blinked. "What is this?" "A corpse," she said. "Taken from those who would have taken me." He stared at it, then at her. "You keep surprising me, Kira." "You have not seen me hunt," she replied. Ronan chuckled dryly and popped open the beacon's housing, gingerly inserting the alien power core into the slot. It hummed to life, a low pulse of energy flooding through the beacon's frame. The screen blinked once, then again. "Alive." Ronan grinned. "We've got a signal." Kira tilted her head. "Then your people will come." "Eventually," he said, adjusting the frequency controls. "Assuming they're listening." He didn't look at her when he said it, but he felt her watching. The question unspoken. "And then you'll leave." He didn't have the answer yet. The beacon began its soft, rhythmic ping, broadcasting across the void. And far behind them, in the hills where the wind had gone still, something else stirred, watching, waiting. Not all exiles were alone. The beacon's pulse echoed faintly in the cold silence. A soft electronic heartbeat struggling against the frozen winds of MX-17. Ronan adjusted the gain slightly, boosting the signal to its maximum range. The moment the status light shifted from red to blue, he felt the weight of possibility settle on his shoulders. It was working. For the first time since the crash, there was a sliver of real hope. Still, it didn't feel as good as it should have. He glanced sideways at Kira, who stood with her back to him, her fur bristling in the breeze as she scanned the tree-line beyond the wreck. Her silence was no longer just a habit. It was a warning. "They'll hear it," Ronan said, breaking the stillness between them. Command will triangulate the signal and send a search drone. Could be a few days, maybe less if we're lucky. Kira's ears twitched, but she didn't turn to face him. I do not trust your luck, she said softly. He chuckled, wiping frost from his gloves. Yeah, well, it got me this far. Kira finally turned. Her eyes weren't sharp or challenging now. They were cautious. You must be ready. They may not be the first to answer your call. Ronan straightened. You think someone else heard it? She nodded. This world is quiet, but not empty. Before he could ask what that meant, a distant howl cut across the icy air, deep and guttural, not like the wind, not like any beast Ronan had heard. It echoed from the cliffs to the west, followed by another, and then another. Not one voice. Many. Ronan drew his sidearm instinctively. Let me guess. Not wolves. Kira didn't flinch. Hunters. My kind. Or what remains of them? Packmates, he asked cautiously. She didn't answer right away. Then, they will not welcome you. Well, you did, he said, trying to make light of it. I chose, she replied. They do not choose. They take. The implications hit Ronan like ice water. They're coming for you. Kira looked away. And what I carry? Ronan's pulse quickened. The power cell. She didn't respond, but her silence spoke volumes. Damn it, he muttered, holstering the sidearm. We need to move. Kira's hand caught his arm. Her claws didn't dig in, but her grip was strong. No, she said. They will find us wherever we run. He met her gaze, the firelight of resolve sparking behind his eyes. Then we don't run. Kira's tail flicked once. You would fight them. You fought for me, he said. Now it's my turn. Her expression shifted, something softening behind her eyes. You are reckless. And you're stubborn, he replied. They stood together in the wreckage, side by side, the signal beacon pulsing between them. The howl came again, closer this time. Ronan tightened his grip on the pistol. Kira unsheathed her claws. No matter who or what came through that snow, they would face it together. The world had fallen silent again, but not with peace, with pressure. The kind of heavy quiet that weighed on Ronan's chest like a held breath before a firefight. Kira stood at the edge of the wreckage, every muscle tight beneath her orange fur. Golden eyes narrowed toward the horizon. Her ears swiveled, tail low and stiff with tension. She didn't speak, but Ronan could see it clearly in her stance. They were being surrounded. How many? He asked, keeping his voice low as he scanned the ridge lines. Too many, she said. 4, maybe 5. I sent them on the wind. Ronan cursed under his breath, checking the charge on his sidearm. Barely enough for 6 clean shots. He had a backup knife, an emergency flash charge, and a distress beacon broadcasting into the void. That was it. I've had worse odds, he muttered. Kira looked over her shoulder, eyes locking with his. They are not like me. What does that mean? She turned fully to face him, her voice tight. I chose exile. They chose blood. If they find me, they will take back what they believe is theirs, and they will kill you for standing near me. Ronan's jaw clenched. Then I guess I'm standing exactly where I should be. A flicker passed over her face, surprise, quickly masked, but her tail curled slightly toward him, brushing lightly against his leg before flicking away. They didn't need to say more. A low growl rolled over the ice from the northeast. Then another from behind. It wasn't just sound. It was a warning. A statement. We see you. Ronan ducked behind a half-crushed section of hull, angling his body to cover Kira's flank. She didn't hide. She crouched forward, claws extended, the breeze rippling through her fur as her breath misted steadily from her muzzle. Then they came. Figures emerged from the storm. Tall, bipedal like Kira, but broader in the shoulders, their fur darker, faces partially covered in bone-carved masks. One in particular wore a cloak stitched from hides, his eyes gleaming like embers behind it. He stepped forward. His voice was rough, layered with something ancient. Kira, you left your bond. You stole the mark. And you call this thing your pack? Ronan stood beside her, weapon raised. Try me. The hunter snarled but didn't charge. You do not understand. That blood is not yours to protect. She made her choice, Ronan snapped. She's not property. The hunter's eyes narrowed. Kira finally spoke. My bond was broken the day you tried to force it. A murmur rolled through the gathered pack. One of anger, one of shame. The leader flinched. You disgraced the old rites. They disgraced me, she growled. It happened in a blink. One of the pack lunged, not at her, but at Ronan. Fast, brutal, aiming low. But Kira was faster. She intercepted with a roar, claws flashing in the cold light. The sound of bone cracking echoed off the cliffs as her attacker hit the snow hard, twitching and still. The message was clear. She wasn't defending him because she had to. She wanted to. The rest of the pack paused, caught between outrage and hesitation. Ronan stepped forward, weapon steady. You want her, he said. You'll have to go through me. Kira moved beside him, tall, blazing, blood on her claws. And me, she said. The leader of the pack tilted his head. His voice was low, almost respectful. Then you are not one of us. Kira smiled without warmth. I never was. He nodded. And then the pack disappeared into the storm, melting away like shadows. Not defeated, but done for now. The cold wind swept back in. Ronan holstered his weapons slowly, exhaling. Well, that went better than expected. Kira turned to him, golden eyes locked on his. You stood with me. I told you, he said. I'm not going anywhere. She stepped closer. Close enough that her breath warmed his neck. You will not regret that. He didn't respond. He didn't need to. In the white silence of the wasteland, they had earned something neither had before, trust. Night returned fast on MX-17. The sun didn't set so much as vanish, slipping behind thick glacial clouds that turned the snow into a field of dull gray shadows. Ronan sat near the remains of the wreck, tightening a makeshift thermal wrap around his shoulders while he monitored the beacon signal. It pulsed steady, still broadcasting, still no answer. Across from him, Kira crouched by a pile of scavenged scrap, her claws working deftly to sharpen the broken shaft of a strut into a makeshift spear. Her movements were precise, rhythmic. Survival distilled to muscle memory. You think they'll come back? Ronan asked, breaking the silence. Kira didn't look up. Eventually. Packs don't forget. He studied her in the faint light of their salvaged fire. She looked calm, but the kind of calm that came after the storm. Like a bowstring drawn but not yet loosed. They called you a thief, he said. Said you stole something. Kira paused. Then she set the spear down and turned her full attention to him. Her expression didn't shift, but her voice was lower when she answered. I took the one thing they couldn't control, she said. My choice. Ronan nodded slowly. The power cell. Her ears flicked, amused. That was a convenience. What I took was freedom. He leaned back against the ruined bulkhead, exhaling. That's what they were really after. They would rather kill me than let me live unbound. Her tail coiled slowly behind her. But they won't get the chance. You sound awfully sure. She looked at him, something unreadable in her golden eyes. Because I have something now I didn't before. Ronan raised a brow. What's that? Her reply was simple. A reason. The word settled over him like falling ash, soft but heavy. He swallowed, unsure how to respond. There was a vulnerability in her tone that hadn't been there before. She wasn't asking for anything. She wasn't claiming him. She was just being honest. After a moment, he pushed himself up and crossed to where she sat. He lowered himself beside her, knees touching lightly, close enough to share body heat. She didn't flinch, didn't move away. "I'm not your reason," he said quietly. "No," she replied. "But you are mine to protect." He couldn't tell if she meant it literally or not. He didn't ask. Instead, they sat there in the cold dark together, back to back with their weapons within reach, listening to the wind pick up once again. There would be more storms. There would be more hunts. But for now, in this fragile space between silence and survival, they had each other. The third morning after the beacon had started transmitting brought with it a sky so clear it looked unnatural, like something had pressed pause on the storm. The wind had calmed, the frost had settled, and overhead the twin moons of MX-17 hung like pale sentinels over the frozen horizon. Ronan stood on a slope just beyond the wreckage, visor pulled down, scanning the vast stretch of wilderness that lay ahead. The beacon continued to chirp rhythmically behind him, its weak but steady pulse whispering across the stars. Still no answer. He lowered the scope and muttered to himself. 3 days. They've either missed the signal, or they're choosing not to respond. Kira padded up behind him without a sound, her orange fur catching faint glints of moonlight. Or the message reached someone else first. He glanced sideways. "You think your old pack will try again?" She gave a small shake of her head. "No. When they retreat, they do not return. They mark you as dead, forgotten." He raised a brow. "You okay with that?" "I have no desire to be remembered by those who would rather see me caged." There was something final in her tone. Something like peace, but not the comforting kind. The peace that came after a burn, a scar, something earned. They stood in silence for a while, watching the white wilderness stretch endlessly before them. Ronan's breath curled into the cold air in slow clouds. Then Kira spoke again, softer this time. "But I wonder." He looked at her. "Wonder what?" "If your people will take you back." The question caught him off guard. It had been on his mind too, gnawing at the edge of his resolve. He hadn't heard a word from command, hadn't picked up any chatter on open frequencies. He'd been gone long enough that the idea of returning felt hazy. "Honestly," he said after a moment. "I don't know." Kira's tail brushed lightly across the backs of his boots. "Then what happens if no one comes?" Ronan exhaled, glancing back toward the wreckage where the fire still smoldered low. "The cave, the camp, the two of them. Then we keep building," he said. Kira turned her head just slightly. "Here." He shrugged. "Where else?" They descended back toward the cave as the cold settled in again. Inside, Ronan pulled a thermal blanket tighter over their gear and stirred the fire. Kira sat across from him, legs tucked beneath her, her fur dusted with flecks of ice. He looked at her, not as a stranger, not as some exotic alien survivor, but as something else. Something familiar. "You're not what I expected," he said. She tilted her head. "What did you expect?" "A wild animal," he admitted. "Someone more teeth than soul." Her muzzle twitched, and her ears flicked in amusement. "There are teeth," she said. "But the soul came first." Ronan grinned. "That's what worries me." "Good," Kira murmured. "I want you cautious. If we are to stay here, we must not grow soft." "We?" he echoed. She blinked once. "Unless you plan to survive alone." He didn't answer. He didn't need to, because in that cold, brutal stillness, Ronan realized something: if no one ever answered that beacon, he might be okay with it. That night, Ronan dreamed of fire. Not the flicker of their small camp flame, but a blaze, roaring and relentless, climbing the hull of a downed ship and leaping skyward in great arcs. Metal screamed, figures moved in shadow, and always, always, the sound of growling, low, angry, close. He woke with a start, breath catching in his throat. Kira was already awake. She sat cross-legged by the fire, sharpening the tip of her spear again with the same focus she always had. Her golden eyes shifted to him as soon as he moved. "You dreamed," she said, not as a question. Ronan rubbed his eyes. "Yeah. One of the bad ones." Kira set the spear aside and leaned forward. "You spoke in your sleep." His brow furrowed. "What did I say?" She hesitated, and something passed through her expression like curiosity shaded by weariness. "A name. Not mine." He nodded slowly. "I had a squad once. Long time ago. We got hit hard on Case 4. I was the only one who walked out." "Did you leave them behind?" she asked gently. He winced. "No. I dragged 2 of them to evac. The others." He paused. "I carried them in pieces." Silence followed that. Kira didn't ask more. She simply nodded. That was enough. Ronan let out a long breath and sat up, running a hand through his tangled hair. "War screws with your head, makes you think you'll never feel anything normal again." "You feel normal now?" she asked. He looked at her, brow raised. "Do I look like I feel normal?" "No," she said with a slight twitch of her lips. "You look like someone trying not to feel anything at all." Ronan laughed dryly. "You're not wrong." Kira leaned forward, her elbows resting on her knees. "You carry grief like armor, but it doesn't protect you." He stared at her, surprised. Not because she was wrong, she wasn't, but because she saw it, understood it. "And you?" he asked. "What do you carry?" Kira's eyes flickered to the fire. "Memories of being hunted. Of choosing exile instead of submission. Of the moment I realized I'd rather bleed alone in the snow than be owned by a pack who never saw me." Her tail curled around her legs, and for a moment she looked smaller. Not weak, but solitary. Isolated by choice, not fate. "I found you," he said, the words quiet. She nodded. "And you stayed." The fire popped between them, a coal cracking under pressure. They sat there sharing silence again, but this one was different, softer, warmer. When Kira finally stood and crossed the space between them, it wasn't like before. There was no claim in her touch, no demand. She sat beside him, her fur brushing his arm, her tail looped lightly around his back. "I will not ask you to stay," she said. "But you want me to," he murmured. She didn't answer. She didn't have to, because when Ronan leaned just slightly into her warmth, she leaned back, and the 2 of them watched the flames burn low together, not as exile and outsider, but something far more fragile and far more real. The wind changed again on the 5th day. Not a storm, not yet. But Ronan could smell the shift in it. The air tasted metallic, electric. He stood atop a ridge not far from their cave, scanning the sky with his visor. For hours, nothing but static, snow clouds. Then just before dusk, a shape, distant, small, but unmistakably artificial. Ronan lowered the scope. "Kira," he called, voice cracking in the frigid air. She was already behind him before he finished the shout, breath steady, ears alert. "What did you see?" He pointed. "There. Low orbit pass. Not a bird. Definitely a scout drone. And if it's scanning for heat signatures, they will find the fire." "And the beacon," Kira said. He nodded. "We might be getting off this rock after all." Kira was quiet for a long time. "Then, you must decide." He turned to her, confused. "Decide what?" "If you will leave." Ronan hesitated. That was the question, wasn't it? The question he'd been circling for days. He looked back at the white expanse below, then to the cave where their gear was, where they had slept side by side for nights without saying what either of them was thinking. I came here by accident, he said. Crashed, cold, alone. I thought I wanted nothing more than to get off this ice trap. And now? He turned fully to face her. Now I don't know what's waiting for me out there, but I know what's here. I know you're here. Her gaze didn't waver. And if they come with a ship? If they land tomorrow and offer you everything you lost? What do you say? Ronan exhaled. I say I want to bring you with me. Kira's ears twitched. That world will not accept me, she said, not bitterly but with quiet certainty. I am not one of yours. He stepped closer. You're mine. Her tail curled slowly around his leg again. Then choose me. I already did, he said. They stood together in the twilight, watching the drone arc across the sky, its soft blue trail a promise of rescue or change. Back at the cave, Ronan sat cross-legged, tinkering with the beacon, strengthening its signal. Kira sat beside him, sharpening her spear again, not because she expected to need it, but because the rhythm helped her think. When the beacon chirped, sharp, bright, different, they both froze. Ronan leaned forward. That's new. Kira tilted her head. What is it? He checked the readout. Response ping. Someone heard us. Coordinates marked. They're coming. Kira's expression was unreadable. Ronan stood slowly and turned to face her. I want you with me. She didn't move. You said you were free. He continued, that no one claimed you. So I'm not asking you to follow me. I'm asking you to walk beside me. Kira stepped forward. And if I say yes? Then we make our own pack. The wind howled outside the cave again, but it no longer felt empty. It felt like a beginning. She smiled, not with teeth, not with fierceness, but with the soft flicker of hope in her eyes. Then yes, she said. Let us go together. And when the ship arrived, piercing through the clouds, lights blazing, they stood at the cliffside, hand and claw ready, not to escape, but to begin again together. The ship descended slowly, its thrusters parting the snow like waves. Ronan and Kira stood on the rise just above the cave, watching the sleek vessel land in a clearing just a few hundred meters away. Its hull shimmered with frost as it settled, the landing gear hissing steam into the frozen earth. It was a coalition rescue vessel. Ronan recognized the markings immediately. His stomach twisted, not with fear, but with the heavy awareness that this was the moment, the real line in the snow. Kira stood beside him, silent. Her tail wrapped loosely around her ankles, her ears angled back, not in fear, but in calculation. She looked every inch the warrior she had always been, but her fingers brushed lightly against his sleeve, barely a touch. You're sure? She asked. He looked at her. Yeah. I am. The boarding ramp lowered, a blast of warm air spilling into the cold as two figures descended, one in a long survival coat, the other armored. Their rifles were slung, but their eyes were wary. Ronan raised his hand slowly. Lieutenant Ronan Kess, he called. Serial 4891D. This is my signal. I sent the beacon. One of the soldiers stepped forward, visor retracting. A woman with a stern face, windburned and lined with fatigue. You're a hard man to find, Lieutenant. Thought you were dead. Not quite, he said, glancing toward Kira. Found something better than a grave. The woman's gaze shifted to Kira, and Ronan saw it immediately. The flicker of hesitation. Not fear, but judgment, curiosity wrapped in caution. This your ally? She asked. Yes, he said firmly. Her name is Kira. She's coming with me. The two soldiers exchanged a look. Not sure Command's going to love that, the woman muttered. We're not in the habit of bringing unregistered Xenos into military space. She saved my life, Ronan said, his voice steel now. Twice. You don't have to love it. You just have to not get in my way. Kira remained silent, but her gaze never wavered from the soldiers. She wasn't posturing. She didn't need to. Her presence said everything. The woman let out a breath and gestured toward the ship. Fine. We'll file the forms in orbit. But if she causes trouble. She won't, Ronan cut in. She's not the one I'm worried about. She's not the one I'm worried about, the woman muttered, turning back toward the ramp. They followed. As they boarded the ship, the heat hit them like a wave. For the first time in days, Ronan felt his body begin to thaw. Kira flinched at the artificial warmth but didn't complain. She stayed close to him, her tail brushing the floor, her steps quiet but sure. Inside, everything was clean, sterile, too bright. He could feel her tense beside him. This world wasn't made for her. Yet she was here anyway, and she wasn't letting go. A medic stepped forward, offering Ronan a scanner. You'll need a checkup, then debrief. Quarantine for the both of you. She's clean, Ronan said. Still protocol, the medic replied. Kira's claws flexed, but Ronan touched her arm gently. It's all right. Just scans. She relaxed. Barely. As they were led down the corridor, Ronan looked up at the ceiling panels. Too smooth, too white. This wasn't the wilderness. This wasn't freedom. But Kira was beside him. He took her hand, and she didn't pull away. Not when they entered the medbay. Not when the doors closed behind them. Not even when the silence returned. This wasn't the end of their journey. It was just the next beginning. The ship's medbay smelled of antiseptic and recirculated air. Too clean, too sharp. Ronan sat on the edge of a padded diagnostic table while a technician ran a scanner over his arm. Across the room, Kira stood like a statue, silent, arms crossed, eyes watching every movement with the suspicion of a cornered huntress. She didn't like the lights, the noise, the machinery. Ronan could see it in the tightness of her posture, the way her tail curled close to her leg. She was used to open space, to the chill of snow and the feel of ground beneath her claws. Here, she was in a cage made of metal and procedure. You're stable, the medic said, pulling the scanner away from Ronan's neck. You've lost about 7 pounds of mass, mostly water and muscle. We'll get you sorted. Ronan nodded, then looked over at Kira. What about her? The medic glanced toward Kira, then back at his readings. Non-human physiology. I'll need to run different scans, but from what I can see, she's in remarkable condition for someone surviving on MX-17. She's tougher than she looks, Ronan said. The medic approached Kira cautiously, scanner in hand. She didn't move, but her golden eyes tracked his every step. I need to check for pathogens, toxins, anything that might. She understands, Ronan interrupted gently. Kira, it's okay. She looked at him, then at the scanner, then back at him. A moment passed. Then she extended her arm, claws retracted. The medic worked quickly, professionally, and when he was done, he stepped back with obvious relief. Clean bill of health, he said. Both of you. As they were escorted to temporary quarters, Ronan felt the weight of transition settling on his shoulders. The sterile corridors, the hum of the ship's engines, the distant chatter of crew members, it was all so familiar, yet it felt foreign now. Like putting on clothes that no longer fit. Their quarters were small but private. 2 bunks, a small table, a viewport showing the star-scattered void beyond MX-17. Kira moved to the viewport immediately, pressing her palm against the reinforced glass. It's beautiful, she said quietly. Ronan joined her. You've never seen space before. Not like this. Not from inside. Her breath fogged the glass slightly. It looks infinite. It is, he said. And terrifying. She looked at him. You're afraid. Of space? No. Of what comes next? He leaned against the bulkhead. I don't know what they'll want from me when we reach the station. Debriefing, reassignment, maybe disciplinary action for going off mission. And me? That was the question that had been eating at him since they boarded. I don't know. They'll want to study you, probably. Learn about your species, your world, your capabilities. Kira's tail twitched. Like a specimen. I won't let that happen. She turned from the viewport to face him fully. You may not have a choice. He met her gaze. There's always a choice. A soft chime indicated an incoming message. Ronan activated the comm panel, and the face of the rescue team's commander appeared on the screen. Lieutenant Kess will be docking at Outpost Meridian in 18 hours. Command wants a full debrief as soon as we arrive. There are questions about your companion. What kind of questions? The kind that require clearance levels above my pay grade. Get some rest. You'll need it. The comm went dark. Ronan stared at the blank screen, jaw tight. They're going to separate us, Kira said. It wasn't a question. They're going to try. She was quiet for a long moment, then moved to one of the bunks and sat down. Tell me about your world. Which one? I've seen dozens. The one you call home. Ronan considered that. I don't have one, really. Been moving from station to station, ship to ship, for the better part of a decade. Home is. He looked at her. Home is wherever I'm not alone. Kira smiled, the first real smile he'd seen from her since they'd boarded. Then we are already home. He sat on the opposite bunk, facing her. Kira, when we dock, things are going to get complicated. There will be people who want to help, and people who see you as a threat or an opportunity. Stay close to me. Trust me. I have trusted you since the cave. This is different. This is politics, bureaucracy, fear dressed up as procedure. It's messier than any pack you've ever faced. Her eyes gleamed. Then I will adapt. The ship hummed around them as they traveled through the void, carrying them toward an uncertain future. But in the small space of their quarters, with the stars wheeling past the viewport, they had found something worth fighting for. 18 hours later, Outpost Meridian appeared on the view screen, a sprawling station built into a massive asteroid, its lights twinkling like a city in space. As their ship approached the docking bay, Ronan could see other vessels, military cruisers, research ships, cargo haulers. The station was busy, which meant news of their rescue had already spread. Stay close, he murmured to Kira as they prepared to disembark. She nodded, but he could see the tension in her stance. This was her first time in a truly human environment, surrounded by hundreds of his kind. To her, it must have felt like walking into the den of potential predators. The airlock cycled, and they stepped onto the station. The docking bay was controlled chaos, workers loading cargo, technicians running diagnostics, security personnel maintaining order. And there, waiting for them, was a delegation Ronan recognized all too well. Commander Sarah Chen, his former CO, Dr. Marcus Webb, the station's chief xenobiologist. And two security officers whose hands rested casually but deliberately near their sidearms. Ronan, Commander Chen said, stepping forward. Good to see you in one piece. Commander. He kept his voice neutral. Her gaze shifted to Kira, taking in every detail, the alien features, the confident posture, the way she stayed protectively close to Ronan's side. And this is our new friend. Kira, Ronan said. She's under my protection. Of course. Chen's smile was diplomatically empty. Dr. Webb is eager to meet her. We have so many questions. Dr. Webb stepped forward, practically vibrating with excitement. Remarkable. The bone structure, the musculature, the adaptive features for cold weather survival. She's not a science project, Ronan cut him off. No, of course not, Webb said quickly. But surely you understand the significance. First contact with a new sapient species. The cultural exchange possibilities alone are not happening today, Commander Chen interrupted smoothly. Lieutenant Kess, you're needed for immediate debriefing. Your companion will be provided with quarters and... No, Ronan said firmly. We stay together. The security officers shifted slightly. Chen's expression didn't change, but something hardened behind her eyes. I'm afraid that's not possible. There are protocols. Protocols can wait. Kira placed a gentle hand on his arm. When she spoke, her voice was calm, measured. I understand your curiosity, she said, addressing Dr. Webb directly. You see something new, something unknown. But I am not unknown to myself. I am Kira, of no pack, bound to no law but my own choosing. I came here willingly, with Ronan, because we are allies. Respect that, and we can speak. Threaten that, and we cannot. The docking bay had grown quieter. Other personnel had stopped their work to watch this unprecedented exchange. Dr. Webb looked fascinated. Commander Chen looked calculating. The security officers looked nervous. Very well, Chen said finally. You'll both be debriefed together. But separately housed. Together, Ronan repeated. That's not. Commander, Kira interrupted gently. On my world, forced separation of bonded pairs is considered an act of war. I assume you do not wish for war. Ronan blinked. Bonded pairs? He shot her a look, but her expression was serene, unreadable. Chen stared at her for a long moment, then at Ronan. Bonded pairs. It's complicated, Ronan said. I'm sure it is. Chen's tone suggested she was adding this to a very long list of complications. Very well. Joint quarters. But with security monitoring. Acceptable, Kira said before Ronan could object. As they were escorted deeper into the station, Ronan leaned close to Kira. Bonded pairs, he whispered. She glanced at him, golden eyes twinkling with something that might have been mischief. It is not entirely a lie, she whispered back. What's that supposed to mean? But before she could answer, they were ushered into a conference room where their real challenges would begin. Through the viewport, the stars wheeled silently, carrying them toward whatever future they would build together. The conference room was sterile and intimidating, a long metal table surrounded by chairs, with multiple recording devices openly displayed. Commander Chen sat across from them, flanked by Dr. Webb and a woman Ronan didn't recognize, tall, severe, with the bearing of someone accustomed to absolute authority. This is Director Hayes, Colonial Intelligence, Chen said by way of introduction. She has some questions. Director Hayes studied them both with cold, calculating eyes. Lieutenant Kess, your mission parameters were quite specific. Reconnaissance of abandoned mining facilities in the Outer Rim. MX-17 was not on your authorized route. My ship suffered catastrophic engine failure, Ronan replied evenly. Emergency landing protocols took me to the nearest habitable world. Habitable is generous, Hayes said dryly. MX-17 is classified as a death world. Nothing lives there. I do, Kira said quietly. Hayes turned her attention to the alien woman. Yes, you do. The question is why. Our geological surveys indicate MX-17 has been frozen for over 1,000 years. No indigenous life forms above the microbial level. No settlements, no ruins, no signs of civilization. Yet here you are. Kira met her gaze steadily. Your surveys were incomplete. Elaborate. My people do not build as you do. We do not leave scars on the world for others to find. We adapt, we survive, we move with the seasons that span centuries. Dr. Webb leaned forward eagerly. A nomadic civilization. But the energy requirements for survival in those temperatures are not beyond us, Kira finished. We evolved there. It is our world. Hayes corrected. According to Lieutenant Kess's report, you were exiled. Ronan felt Kira tense beside him. This was dangerous territory. I chose freedom over subjugation, Kira said simply. And now you've chosen to leave your world entirely. Why? The silence stretched. Ronan could see Kira weighing her words, choosing what to reveal and what to keep hidden. Because, she said finally, I found something worth more than survival. Hayes raised an eyebrow. And what's that? Kira looked at Ronan, then back at Hayes. Purpose. Which is to walk beside one who saw me not as a tool to be used, but as a person to be respected. Dr. Webb was scribbling notes furiously. Commander Chen looked uncomfortable. Director Hayes remained impassive. Lieutenant Kess, Hayes said, shifting focus. In your preliminary report, you mentioned that this individual provided you with advanced technology. A power source that enabled your beacon repairs. Ronan nodded carefully. That's correct. We'd like to examine this technology. It was damaged in the rescue extraction, Ronan lied smoothly. Irreparable. Hayes's eyes narrowed slightly. She didn't believe him, but she couldn't prove otherwise. I see. And during your time together, did you observe any other advanced technology? Weapons, communication devices, transportation. She had basic survival gear. Nothing more. Another lie, but a necessary one. The power cell Kira had given him was far beyond anything human technology could produce. In the wrong hands, it could shift the balance of power between entire star systems. Dr. Webb, Hayes said, what's your initial assessment? Webb looked up from his notes, eyes bright with scientific fervor. Physiologically remarkable. Adaptive evolution to extreme environments, enhanced healing capabilities, sensory organs evolved for survival in perpetual winter conditions. Culturally, they appear to operate on a pack-based social structure with complex bonding rituals. Bonding rituals? Hayes interrupted. Webb glanced at Kira, then at Ronan. Well, according to Miss Kira's earlier statement about bonded pairs. We haven't discussed that yet, Chen interjected quickly. Hayes leaned back in her chair. No, let's discuss it now. Miss Kira, please explain this bonding process. Kira was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of something ancient and deeply personal. When one saves the life of another, a debt is created. This debt can be repaid through service, through blood, or through bond. I offered service. He offered partnership. In my culture, this creates a tie that cannot be broken by others, only by the bonded themselves. Hayes looked at Ronan. And you accept this bond? Ronan met her gaze steadily. I accept her choice to stand with me. Just as she accepts mine to stand with her. How romantic, Hayes said dryly. And convenient. Bonded pairs receive special protections under colonial law. You can't be separated without mutual consent, can't be forced to testify against each other, and both parties must consent to any research or examination. I wasn't aware of that, Ronan said truthfully. But she was, Hayes replied, looking at Kira with newfound respect. You've studied our laws. I learn quickly, Kira said. Hayes stood abruptly. This interview is concluded for now. You'll be provided with quarters and basic necessities. Dr. Webb will want to conduct non-invasive cultural exchanges at your convenience. Commander Chen will handle your reassignment paperwork, Lieutenant. We'll reconvene tomorrow. As they were escorted out, Ronan caught Hayes's arm. Director, I want to be clear about something. Kira didn't ask to be rescued. She chose to come with me. If the colonial government tries to treat her as anything less than a free citizen. You'll do what, Lieutenant? Hayes asked quietly. Ronan looked at her, then at Kira, then back at Hayes. I'll make sure she has other options. Hayes studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Noted. For what it's worth, Lieutenant, I believe you. Both of you. But there are political realities here that go far beyond what happened on MX-17. Tread carefully. Their quarters were larger than the ship's accommodations but still clearly designed for human occupants. 2 beds, a small sitting area, a food processor, and most importantly, a viewport showing the star field beyond the station. Kira went to it immediately, as she had on the ship. You played that well, Ronan said. The bonding thing. She turned from the viewport. It was not entirely a performance. What do you mean? She crossed to where he stood, stopping close enough that he could feel the warmth radiating from her fur. On my world, bonds are not given lightly. They are not taken lightly. When I said you were mine, when you said you would not leave me, these were not just words. Ronan felt something shift inside him, a recognition of something he'd been avoiding acknowledging. Kira. I am not asking for promises you cannot make, she said gently. I am telling you what already exists. You have been mine since the cave, just as I have been yours. The question is not whether this bond exists. The question is what we do with it. He reached up, touching her face gently. Her fur was soft, warm. And what do you want to do with it? She leaned into his touch. Build something new. Something that belongs to neither your world nor mine, but to us. Outside their viewport, the stars wheeled in their ancient dance. Inside, 2 souls from different worlds made a choice that would echo across the galaxy. The bond was real. The future was unwritten. And together, they would face whatever came next.